Welcome to Shamanic Voices, a podcast aimed at bringing our ancient, indigenous Nordic wisdom traditions and perspectives, bringing these to bear on the challenges that we face in our modern world. I am your host, Georg, and we will often be joined by co-hosts, Laurie as our producer, and you can find our bi-monthly episodes on most major platforms. And if you enjoy this and like to read as well, please look up our blog with dozens of articles on health-related topics at teutonichealing.com. And now, let's get on with our show. Welcome to our podcast. This is Georg and Laurie, and today we're in our second interview with Mike Reynolds about some of his experiences, his origin, where he came from, and above all, what it's like to be a targeted individual. Okay, so Mike, pick up what we were getting into last week. I think you're well over 9 and you're getting out on your own, so.
Yeah, last week I just want to fill in a little bit on that to the extent that I think I was suffering through a little bit of long COVID, so my mind just was not really completely there. There was just a lot of mental gunk. I really felt like there was a lot of mental cobwebs, and that my synaptic or dendritic connections were just frozen. I just really wasn't thinking clearly. My memory really wasn't that good, but I remember, I think it was in early 1997. My sister Ashley and I were in my mother's vehicle with her boyfriend, and they had gone to the hospital because my youngest brother had consumed berries, and it was thought that those berries that he had consumed were poisonous berries. And so my biological mother was very apprehensive and very worried and concerned that they might be poisonous berries. And so she took my little brother Jay into the hospital, and I think this was up in Newark. I'm not entirely sure. And so my sister was sitting in the front seat. I think she was on the driver's side. And James was sitting on the passenger side. And I remember him pulling out his penis and forcing my sister to perform oral sex on him. And I remember looking over and seeing this take place, and the tears that were in her eyes, and me not being able to, being a little boy, not being able to protect Ashley.
Now, how old are you when this is happening?
I was about, I would say 96, I was 7 years old. And
so this is happening in the car while mom's driving?
No, it was in the parking lot at a hospital.
Okay.
My little brother Jay, who was taken into the ER by my mother because she thought he had, Ashley had given him poison berries. So we were in the hospital parking lot, and he was doing this in the hospital parking lot.
So the three of you were left out in the parking lot by yourselves?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make it clear.
Uh-huh. And she was in tears because he was forcing his genitalia in her mouth, and there was nothing that I could do to overpower or stop him. And I remember I've seen later on my mother come out with my little brother, and he patted her on the head, told her, "Oh, it's okay." He's zipped up his pants, And I don't remember if my mother reacted to seeing my sister in tears. She must have seen my sister in tears, but I remember on the way back to his place, my mother was going to, drop him off at the place that he was staying at. And we'd left after my mother had dropped him off. And I remember being in the back again of the back of her vehicle, and I said, Mom, James put his pee-pee in Ashley's mouth. And I remember her doing a U-turn and then speeding back to her boyfriend's house. And she had confronted him about it, and he vehemently denied it and said, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And I remember my grandmother at some point coming there as well. And I was told by my grandmother not to say anything, to keep my mouth shut. And then they proceeded to take a stick and beat me with the stick. So at a very young age, that wired my brain that, if you go to protect somebody that you love, not only do you have to keep your mouth shut if something bad happens to them, but you're going to get hurt if you say anything.
Did they ever ask your sister what happened?
Um, I don't remember that part. I really don't remember. I don't even know where she was at that point. I only remember visuals of where my
Yeah.
grandmother was standing, where my mother was, where James was standing. I don't even remember at that point where my sister was at. I know that she was with us, but I don't ever remember her being asked um, anything. It's a very patchy, I don't really remember a lot other
Well,
than,
take us forward from that point, Mike. What happens next as your life unfolds?
well, um,
You're taken away at age 9 and living with this Mormon family.
yeah, and there was a certainly a change, and they were not um, there wasn't it was a different situation, but we were very my siblings and I were very troubled, and we had a lot of behavioral problems, and we had to do a lot of counseling. And with my adoptive family, this is a very difficult thing for me to think about because it was a different environment. They were very religious. There was a lot more stability. There were two parents versus one. And the worst that happened with that being with them was just them having to cope with dealing with five damaged children and not knowing really how to cope with all the problems that came with five abused kids. And I remember the first year of being there, um, my adopted parents didn't want to adopt us. They went to the Children's Services agency and said that we can't adopt these kids. This is too much for us. Long story short, the caseworker was able to manage to talk my adoptive parents into, going along and going through with the adoption. But they were overwhelmed. They had already had four separate children that they had adopted that came from four separate families. And you know, it was two of them had already moved out, and it was very difficult for them to inject five kids with five different personalities into their family setting. It was actually quite stable. And then you introduce five kids that are absolutely chaotic and damaged. It was very difficult for them. So their methods I remember, of punishment weren't nearly as severe as what my biological mother did to us as children, but if we acted up, for example, in church, we'd stand in the corner for hours at a time. If I was bad or something, my parents would make me eat one slice of bread or drink a cup of water. There was a couple of times of physical abuse where I was, I think being lippy with my mother and then being socked in the face, and then my little brother having his tooth broken because his head was slammed off the van.
Slammed off the what?
Off of a van, and it chipped his tooth. So there was some things
What?
that were
Who slammed his head off of a van?
my adoptive mother and my little brother Christopher. So there's five of us. There's me, my sister Ashley, my brother Christopher, my sister Brittany, and my little brother Jay. Uh, and With Christopher, I remember there was a time where, I mean, he was literally for months. There was this like 3x3 square that was on top of the steps that led down to the basement of my parents' home property. Um, they'd gotten several acres out in the country, and it's a nice country home. But I remember my brother sleeping on a coat. He had no pillow, no blanket, and he would be literally curled up in a ball because the space was too small for him. He couldn't stretch his legs out or anything like that. So there was abuse in my um, adoptive home, but it was not to the magnitude or the degree of abuse that was in my biological home. I remember one time I was sleeping in the living room, and one of our cats had jumped up on the American flag, and the cat had broken the flag, and my adopted dad had walked into the room, and he said, "Why did you break that flag?" And I said, "I didn't break that flag at all. It was the cat." And then he literally proceeded to kick the living crap out of me. I was a little child, kicking the crap out of me in the living room. And there was a couple of times I would walk downstairs from my room I don't know if I was going to grab some food or water or whatever. And there's sometimes he would be watching stuff that was very inappropriate. So there were some things in my adoptive family, some physical abuse from some older siblings, a sister. But I've kind of let go of all of that. But it was a very difficult situation to be in. Um, any normal person um, would not want to take on five children. So in a way, some of the things that they did, I thought was very unethical and immoral and borderline abuse. But given the set of circumstances and the things that they had to deal with five children, I really can't throw any stones at them. I mean, there was some things that were pretty bad. Um, but there was the stability of the church that they went to as practicing Mormons. So um, we did go to church every Sunday, and we did, of course, have some stability that we didn't have in our biological home, and it certainly was an upgrade from the prior living situation that we were in, being primarily with a single mother, a drug addicted alcoholic who was very physically abusive. So there was very little minimal physical abuse in my adoptive family setting. Um, but there was other forms of abuse. And a lot of it I really don't remember, other than I remember going to the White House with my siblings. And I've mentioned this before in our first interview. We were doing a tour at the White House during the Clinton administration in the late 90s. It was September of 1998. And I had mentioned, and I do believe I mentioned this in the first interview, that um, I had asked where the president was at and was told, and I said this during the first interview, but I was told that he was on a helicopter ride. And then I was pulled out of my body. Everything completely had changed. And I could see myself outside of myself standing in front of this lady who was giving the tour from a distance. And then everything went pitch black. And then I remember an aerial view of being in my parents' house and then zooming into my body into the basement. And I remember running up the steps thinking, as soon as I got up to the main floor, um, into the TV room, I remember seeing the towers on fire and mentioning how cool I thought it was because I thought it was a movie. And I was told it from my mother to go back down. She was in the living room watching. I was told to go back downstairs. She was very upset with my reaction, not really thinking about me seeing that. And of course, she didn't know that I thought it was a movie. Um, but that there was a 3 years of just a literal pitch black with no memory whatsoever. So from September 98 to September of 2001, I have no recollection of anything. Um, and then after 2001, there was just a lot of unresolved emotional trauma and pain that wasn't aptly being addressed the way that it should. Because my parents' hands were tied. They didn't really know what to do with five damaged children and our behavioral problems. And, you know, if it had probably been anybody else, they probably would have killed all five of us kids. We were really a bundle of chaos. And I remember going back into a foster care home because my adoptive parents were being accused of child abuse. And so I was taken out and then reintegrated back into the foster care system. And so I was in foster care for about a year or two, and then I went back with my adoptive family. And I never really bonded with them. I never really connected with them. Um, it always felt like there was really no real relationship. Um, I'm pretty sure that Craig, that you've seen that in families, that some families are very touchy-feely and emotionally warm, and they're emotionally rich, and there's a real strong connectivity that you have with that person. Uh, with me and my adoptive family, there was really just a disconnect. There really wasn't that warm emotional connection. I mean, there was a little bit with my mother to some extent for a very brief period of time, but it was fleeting. It never was anything that was long or even substantiated. So,
Do you think your early childhood experiences led you to process that experience at the White House a little bit differently than you would have otherwise?
I'm not entirely sure, but it does tie into bouncing, fast forwarding years later to this very strong instinctive pull to go to the White House and to be politically active. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but there was some form of programming, but I simply cannot retrieve it. And I really am a novice when it comes to how mind control works. I know some very, very basic information, such as project names like Project Paperclip, MK Ultra, Project Artichoke, um, Project Midnight Climax. Um, I'm familiar with some of that, and but there was no other place in my childhood when I was adopted that we really went to other than Utah, which is where my father's family is from, and they are lifelong Mormons. They go back to the founding of the church, um, and then Washington, D.C. And then also, I wanted to point out that we were homeschooled, so we had a different education than what maybe kids in school, public school, would have. Um, but yeah, I really don't, with what the question that you asked, I really don't know how to really answer it because I've never really processed a lot of this. But I know that the recent, um, recently, within the last year or two, that I have had some programming up there, this extremely strong, overpowering drive to be in Washington, D.C. But with these mind control programs, it's there's a lot that I don't understand, other than with those projects that are taking place, that they haven't stopped those mind control experiments at all. They claim that they did in the 1970s, that they'd stopped experimenting on humans, but I can tell you that, like him or hate him, that Donald Trump, there was a small little clip of, like, I think it was 19 seconds or 17 seconds, in which Trump did say that there were citizens in this country that are being experimented on illegally. I can't really reference what the where he said that, when he said that, but I remember quite clearly hearing him say that. But I think what they do now is they do it remotely. I know that DARPA has worked on aerosolized nanotech that can pass these particles. You can breathe them in, and they can pass the blood-brain barrier, and that they're collecting biometric data. When we did some people who received the COVID shot may have been injected with some experimental nanotech or graphene oxide or hydrogel, but I know that they have an aerosolized form of it that is self-replicating. And I am in fear of that because it's different than what it was in, the Weimar Republic in the 20s and 30s, where minority groups were being targeted and experimented on, social deviant or sexual deviants, moral deviants, people that were mentally ill, or people that couldn't defend themselves with lawyers. I know that the Nazis were doing that in the 1920s and 30s as the society was being corrupted. And that is going on in America today, but now there's plausible deniability, because if somebody is a drug addict or an alcoholic, you can't really disentangle those symptoms with directed energy weapons. And they can discombobulate somebody's dendritic system. They can discombobulate the mind. If they've got your biometric data through a nasal swab or through a DNA kit, they can upload that into a supercomputer and then use a cell phone tower frequency in conjunction with your phone to manipulate your hormones. They can induce a state of psychological frenzy, anger, depression. They even have a suicide frequency. Um, and it's scary now because it can be done wirelessly and there's plausible deniability. So if somebody's a drug or alcoholic, you know, and they experiment on them, they can just write them off as schizophrenic or bipolar or whatever. And it could very well be that they have a predisposition, uh, in a biological sense, a predisposition to mental illness. And, there is tests that they can conduct that ties into our biology, and but they can do it also with these harmonic frequencies. And
What do you think the
somebody,
point of all that is? Why do all that?
it's complete domination. It's the control of the mind from conscious to subconscious. I mean, it is their ultimate desire is to create an AI cybernetic hive mind where everybody is subservient to a one world order, a one world ideology. Um,
Do you think this is going to, Mike, do you think this is going to require the implementation of chips on most people?
Well, with the aerosolized nanotech, there's a guy that had worked on this from DARPA. I can't think of his name. I think he's Italian, but they don't have to physiologically chip us. You can breathe in these nanotech particles, and breathing them in, they get into your brain, and then they can create basically a digital version of yourself, like a digital twin copy of you. It's called a digital twin, and they want to do that for 7 billion people. So a replica of us in a digital form that they can manipulate remotely. So if somebody was outspoken against a particular agenda that's being pushed, and they have your biometric data, and you have any kind of like political influence, social influence, if they've got your biometric data and your social credit score, they can manipulate that to where it's negative, then they can target at us remotely and emit a frequency in conjunction with our biology to irradiate us to death, to give us turbo cancers, to basically fry us remotely. They don't have to, they don't have to take us to a gulag. They don't have to take us to a concentration camp. They can, they're using the AI to create a digital gulag. They call them it's called a cell phone. And it's basically an extension of us. And it's the technology that is ultimately, unfortunately, that's going to enslave us.
Well, what is it? What is the impetus behind this? What is the end goal? I mean, we have these leaders of all these Christian nations where all this was developed with money from Christian taxpayers being
Mhm.
sent to laboratories, and then they go out and tie in the communist Chinese to help them develop this stuff, as they did with COVID. All of these patents, if you see Dr. David Martin's work, he's, I think, a biochemist and a Juris Doctor at JD. He goes into all the patents for all these diseases, including AIDS, SARS, MERS, H1N1, H1N9, all of these diseases. Every one of them we've heard about in recent history, there's a patent on it because it was developed in a US lab. So what do they get out of
Well,
this?
there's one thing that had popped in my mind that I did not read this anywhere. Somebody didn't mention it from like a podcast on Rumble or anything, but I had this kind of inner thought of like, if the Chinese government wants to overtake the world and displace America's hegemony over the world, how would they do it with AI? How would they? Because we're protected by the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and we have the strongest military in the world. So how would they overtake us? Well, there's the fentanyl crisis. There's the breakdown of the nuclear family and the pushing of a culture of alcohol, drugs, sexual promiscuity, and death. But how would they, Craig, how would they invade us? And I thought, if I was playing the devil's advocate and I wanted to invade a country, I would do it through some source of transference. I think it's 98 or at least over 90% of all of our fireworks comes from China. And I was thinking, what if the Chinese government put aerosolized nanotech in the fireworks? And then we have our 4th of July, and then all of this smart dust is being spread through the fireworks. And, they have these celebrations in the District of Columbia. They have it in Salt Lake City, which, of course, the NSA is pretty close to Salt Lake City. So what if they were using the fireworks as a Trojan horse an aerosolized nanotech mind control virus
Well,
to.
why would you wait for special occasions with like 4th of July when you've got these flights all the time? The chemtrails, or as they call them, what is it? Aerosolized engineered particle distribution. There's some fancy name for it now, besides chemtrails. They actually emit atmospheric injections of these
Mhm.
particles, which includes barium and other
Yeah,
radioactive elements. Why
I
would you
don't.
wait?
Well, yeah. Um, yeah, well, I've never really thought of the chemtrails, but with this technology, you would think that they would use it to make the world a better place. This is the ADHD kicking in because my mind likes to go to a million different places and I get off topic and then sometimes I talk in circles. It's a character defect that I need to work on. But I remember there was a small little clip of a couple of seconds where Robert Duncan had mentioned that they could use a harmonic frequency to sharpen our brain because we're biochemical matter. We're a body, obviously, of energy and frequency, and that like it was similar to LASIK eye surgery or breaking up a kidney stone that they could actually sharpen and increase dendritic connections in their brain with a harmonic frequency to literally sharpen people's cognitive functions. And I thought, like, why don't they do that all across the board, red, yellow, black, and white, of all people all over the world? Why wouldn't they use the AI to make people smarter and more intelligent and even more ethical? Or,
Well, because
using it to tell us.
those people then would be harder to control.
Well, I just thinking in a not that I'm a communist, but in a collectivized sense, we're all in the same fish tank. You would think that the people that are running the world, the 1/100th of 1% would say, hey, why don't we use this technology? If we made everybody with an IQ of 130 or 150 and they all work together, we would do so much better collectively as a humanoid species. Because then with that kind of mind power, we could focus on what's out there in the universe. Everybody's thinking Team China, Team India, Team America, and they're hyper nationalistic and they're divided and they're competing with each other for world domination. I would think that why wouldn't people collectively as a human species work cohesively together to not only improve the quality of life on Earth, but to explore the universe because everyone's fighting on this planet over what they perceive to be limited resources. But we've got an infinite universe, potentially with infinite resources. I'm thinking, why not use that technology in a positive way that brings people together and ends disease? And they're hoarding that knowledge. They're hoarding, and they're using that knowledge to corrupt society, to enslave to society, and to destroy human life. Like the technology is being used for evil. So you and I are on the same wavelength. I think, we're scratching our heads thinking, well, why are they using it to torture people?
Well, I suspect that they are harvesting the overwhelming feelings of people who are undergoing deprivation, pain, alienation.
And I
They're
felt
picking,
that. I
and
felt that, Craig, if I
I
could interrupt, that frequency technology, I have actually felt uh, those attacks that people talk about when they get hit with directed energy weapons. It's literally like feeling like you're in a microwave, and from head to toe, you have this burning sensation in your body, a microwave
now we
feeling.
get back to you as a targeted individual, which is what
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about.
And that hit they have an ability, like in the 1970s, they could induce a heart attack with a gun that had uh, pufferfish poison in the bullet. And the pufferfish poison would induce a heart attack. But now with your biometric data and aerosolized nanotech, like I don't know how all the technology works. But I know that from what I experienced that they can. There's natural organic
But when did you experience a microwave attack?
This stuff probably really started off when I went to Washington, D.C. for the first time on my own in 2016 through
Well,
27.
how old are you then?
I was 27, 28.
Okay.
So it's been going on for almost 10 years. But when I got hit with the frequency system, it's a real energy that you physically
Now,
feel in
this
your
is when
body.
you were working with that little group who were trying to set up a booth on the White House lawn or something like that. Is that correct?
Well, the peace vigil, that was something that was completely separate when I first went to DC. One of the things that when I first went to DC in 2016, I don't really remember too much of the directed energy weapons, but I remember, yeah, I can't remember the programmer's name because a lot of it you get your memory erased. But I had was involved in I created a Facebook account at the name of Adam Goldstein where I posed as an extreme right-wing fanatic, Mein Kampf, National Alliance, all these, very right-wing, anti-Semitic, racist groups, and I
Wait, now
created.
let me understand. You post
Yeah,
using what apparently is a Jewish name to represent far right groups. Is that
yeah,
correct?
it was a part of uh, me being used as a patsy, a front man to collect data for the intelligence agencies by posing as a right wing fanatic.
So which
On my
intelligence agency was paying you or hiring you to do
no,
this?
no, I was not paid, um, and I was not hired. I just remember I don't know where the place was at. That's the problem with this is that I don't know if it's a drug or if it's a frequency, but they have a way of being able to program somebody and delete their memory. I don't know how. See, this is where Robert Duncan would come in handy because I
Now, Robert
don't.
Duncan is a psychologist who's dealing with targeted individuals, right?
Yeah, I don't know how it works, but I do know that they do program and they can program a set of biochemical frequency signatures that can become attenuated to your brain and that they can download a set of instructions directly into your subconscious mind without your conscious awareness, and then they can activate it later on.
Now, what were the nature of some of the instructions that they downloaded to you?
Mine was to create um, a a social media account to gather intel for the intelligence community in regards to right wing groups, information that perhaps the CIA, FBI, and maybe even Mossad would want, because there was a lot of right wing activism going on at that time. And I don't know how all these programs work, other than that they do use patsies, they do use people that they deem expendable. Like
I
what?
guess it's a little hard for those of us out here in the flyover country to understand why they're using patsies to gain information on right-wing groups, which are very small, very impotent. When in the summer of love with the George Floyd so-called protests, you have dozens of cities where there are serious riots breaking out. Let's not call them protests. They weren't protests. I mean, police cars being firebombed, turned over, white people being dragged out of their cars and beat the crap out of them. Not that it's okay to do that to anybody, it isn't, but specifically some types of individuals being targeted by these mobs coast to coast in all these blue cities, especially. And
Mhm.
they're concerned about the right wing. How about the left wing violence, infiltration by Chinese communist forces, being propped up by
Yeah.
Chinese communist
Um,
forces, all of that.
well,
I mean, I don't,
that was 5 years, and I think that also part of it was on my end was trying to understand their psychological mental makeup to um, understand them completely and totally. And it was me taking on the role, stepping into their shoes, reading their doctrine, listening to their right-wing propaganda, and feeling what they felt. Um, and literally, I was literally one of them for several years, and then I pulled myself out. It was like an alternate, like you hear the multiple personalities. It was a different alter, and I
Now,
pulled out.
why was it so important for you to understand where these groups were coming from?
I guess a lot of it had to do with curiosity and really a lot of it was curiosity and boredom. A lot of it was just I wanted to understand why these people were, I guess, so hateful and you know what motivated them to do what they do and why they think the way that they think. I just really wanted to intimately understand it. And the only way I could understand it was to become one of them and feel everything that they felt and think the way that they think. But I pulled myself out of it and I learned what I needed to learn. I can't tell you why other than um, it was something that was programmed into me. There's a lot of things that are actually programmed into us on a subconscious level that we're not even conscientiously aware of, and it's
So if let's follow up. Let's follow up on your thought, Mike. If it was programmed into you, perhaps the same devices, however they're doing it, they were able to remotely read what you were getting out of it, whether you verbally reported to them or not. That may have not been necessary. They may have been able to remotely read exactly what you were picking up as you did this investigation. What do you think?
uh, there's nothing new under the sun, and there's certainly a lot that doesn't surprise me. I would not be surprised at all, but the pendulum swung the other way. Now it's the far left. Um, and I really do believe that there is spiritual righteousness and spiritual wickedness in high places. And, when it comes down to the technology and what they're able to do with it, I know that there is I think it's really fallen angel technology. I really believe that this technology
So
is all the decades of human research by tens of thousands of scientists and inventors, we just sweep that all under the rug and say it's from fallen angels to make it force fit to anything in the Bible and stick a biblical interpretation over what are obvious historical facts to the contrary. Those humans invented all this stuff Mhm.
through great toil, and we can actually trace the steps in scientific history.
Is it possible that there's unseen forces that can manipulate human consciousness and that the human beings that are inventing these technologies are being manipulated by an unseen force?
Why would it be fallen angels? Somebody invents a system whereby a doctor in South Africa is performing a delicate operation. Somebody in Salt Lake City knows how to do that operation, and it's even remotely being instrumented. Very detailed, very delicate things are happening 10,000 miles away. Now, how is that from fallen angels or anything evil? That's for the good. A lot of this technology has been life-saving, life-enhancing. Why do we have to assume any progress is evil? I don't get that.
Well, um, well, Robert had said, that the technology is neutral and it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. So, in that, what you had just mentioned, that certainly is true in that example that um, the technology can be used for good and it has been used for good, but it's also, I think, primarily being used for evil. But when I think about the fallen angels, I'm not thinking about green aliens. I'm thinking about interdimensional beings that can interfere with our cognitive processes, and that these unseen forces, I mean, some people call them fallen angels, can manipulate the human mind. And these people who are inventing some of these technologies that are being used also for evil, that when they created these technologies, that yes, this human being and this human being, have this patent, and they did the footwork, they went to college, they got their degrees, and then they invented this technology. But I think it is also possible that an unseen force could have put thoughts or ideas into their mind that they thought were their own, and that they have been used to create this technology ultimately to enslave us. So it's kind of like a Russian roulette doll. That's how I kind of think of it, is that there's something outside of us that's not humanoid that can manipulate us in a way that is detrimental.
Now, why would it require something outside of us? If we look at the behavior of dogs or cats, we have both a mammalian instinct, a bonding instinct, looking after each other, looking after their owners, but also an ability to get feral and get mean and hurry and be totally atavistic and selfish and predatory. So don't we all have that dual nature, all mammals, all intelligent life on this planet? We have a reptilian brain, we have a mammalian brain, and it depends on which one is in dominance at a given time. And these are just facts. I mean, that's how we're hardwired. We have the ability to look after another, to do what is for the greater good, or to be selfish and ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
So it's our choice. It doesn't require some external being in a control tower somewhere controlling us, does it?
Well, I can certainly agree. But when I've when I'd gone through an attack from this technology, because there's many people that are considered targeted individuals and or believe that they are targeted individuals. But when you get attacked or experimented on with this technology, it is something you can definitely feel. There is a definite physiological change that you have within your body. And I have personally felt it in my heart section. I know that there are people that can have natural heart problems, and I know that there are things called panic attacks that can create physical sensations in the heart that are very painful. But it can also be done remotely with a harmonic frequency. And when that has happened to me, I can certainly feel it, and it is a absolutely
Okay,
terrifying.
when they attacked you with this harmonic frequency, what was the goal of it? What were they trying to force you to do or control you into doing or punish you for not doing?
I think some of it is a game. It's like if somebody's taking, cocks out the fight or dogs out the fight, they watch these matches of dogs going at it. You know, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Hostel. It's a lot like that. I think
No, I
there's
haven't.
like, you see a kid with a magnifying glass burning an ant. Like, why are they doing that? I think that there are people out there, groups out there, that when it comes to using the technology, that there's some sadistic pleasure that they get out of torturing people. Gangs do it all the time, like the cartels with rival gangs. They behead people and skin them alive. Like, why would people use technology to harm people? Some people do it because they get pleasure out of it.
Well, at what point does this carry over from simple criminal barbarism, which we always had, like some of the Mexican gangs where they do El Briso, I think it's called. They call it the stew, where they actually
Mm,
slowly cook somebody in a vat of oil. I mean, totally barbaric and
yeah.
disgusting stuff like that, versus a controlled, targeted individual sort of thing, where it sounds very scientific, like they have a certain goal in mind. They're trying to induce a certain behavior, punish you for not following a certain behavior, gathering data on it. I mean, at what
Well,
point do
and
you
if
cross that
you're
line?
being for a political agenda and you do not want to go along with it, then I can see where they can attack you with these frequency weapons technologies to destabilize you or to get you to commit suicide or to drive you completely up the wall. And that also is scary because if you do have a conscience and you don't want to be involved in a political agenda and in the sense that you yourself are being used as a guinea pig to be a political.
So what sort of political agenda were they trying to put you into where you resisted and were hit with the?
Very far left LGBTQ plus agenda, and me being abused as a child and what I went through. um, I wouldn't want anybody to go through that. And there's this huge agenda that it's absolutely terrible. The sexualization of children and teenagers. This
Sure.
ultimately leads to the
What, what,
destruction.
what do the people pushing this gain by torturing you, or how would they use you to further their agenda?
What's the gain if you can demoralize a country by pushing abhorrent sexual behavior and drugs and alcohol? You benefit greatly from that. I mean, think about all the medications that they have out there for STIs, or such as AIDS or hepatitis C.
Do you mean
Very
STDs? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very profitable if you can uh, hook somebody to pornography or to drugs or to alcohol or big pharma. So it's like, well, why are they pushing this agenda? Because if corruption is profitable, it's the big pharma is an example. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. If you can get people sick and keep them dependent on something that only masks the symptoms, it doesn't get to the root of the issue. It's very profitable to not completely fix the issue. I mean, I kind of think of somebody that's in the lawn mowing business. They're banking on the fact that the grass is going to grow again, and it keeps them in business. So, and
So
I
what were they expecting you, Mike, to do that you were being pushed or tortured if you didn't do it as part of the LGBT,
to
the whole
be
thing?
um uh, to be a political activist to push an agenda that would normalize the minor attraction, using my childhood abuse and what I went through, um, that generational sin or that negative programming to use me as a guinea pig to push for the map agenda, which I do not want any part of because I was abused as a child.
Okay, you'll have to explain. I think we know what minor attracted person means. Is that what you mean by the DMAP agenda?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So they've already done the 1960s, the civil rights, the gay rights. They've moved to the LGBTQ, and now they're pushing for the MAP agenda. And that is, once somebody crosses that line in any culture, especially, I mean, it happened in the Weimar Republic during the 1920s. That was one of the chief complaints of the Nazi Party, was that the Frankfurt School was pushing pedophilia and lesbianism and homosexuality, and there was a lot of drug and alcohol. The society was being corrupted from within. That's what's going on here in America in the
Well,
night.
I think we have to separate people who legitimately are homosexuals from those who are willing to or able to abuse children. That's a totally different thing. I mean, their
Right.
own sexual orientation is none of my business. I don't care what they do in their own bedroom. But of course, if children are being hurt, that's a whole different matter.
Well, when it the reason why this is being pushed is it's the people that are pushing are profiting from it, and that's why the agenda is being pushed, and it's on to the next thing and the next and the next. It's
What
being
if it's
pushed.
not so much economic profit, Mike, as if it's just creating chaos because the family, the nuclear family, as we once understood it to possibly be, is kind of the rivet holding the whole structure of society together. It's where values are learned, where you compare notes around the dinner table, you have a sense of belonging, a sense of orientation. You kind of know what your life is about from your
Mhm.
family to at least a large extent. And so by destroying the family as an accretion point for a culture and as a pivot point through which the individual emerges into adulthood, you would create a certain amount of chaos. Isn't that a
Yeah.
possible explanation? And then
Oh,
from the chaos, you could fashion anything you want in the absence of the family, like the Red Guard in China, which was based upon, to a large extent, the demise of the family and the replacement by a collectivist system where children are put in work dormitories. Mom's over here working in this dormitory at this factory 12, 16 hours a day. Dad's over here, and the kids are over there doing child labor.
yeah, and it's also I think that, or I believe that it's pushing us toward the a new world, a new world order, and that the state would raise the children. And I think a lot of what's going on at the border is that, you have these undocumented immigrants and children, but I actually do believe that they have covert programs here in the United States where they are raising an army of, an army, a New World Order army, it's not just sex trafficking, but they're taking a lot of these undocumented kids and they're privately educating them into a New World ideology. And I don't know if they're sleeper agents. It's kind of like the movie Salt. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Salt, but has Angelina
No.
Jolie in it. But maybe it's a form of like Lebensbraun, where they're genetically altered and they are given a completely different education than the general public. I don't know if they're spies. I don't know if they're agents for the New World Order.
Now,
I
would you
don't.
say this is the usual thing with a targeted individual, that they're targeting you to become an agent of influence,
But
or
yeah, but
is
I believe that um, it's being used in a maybe a negative way. I'm not entirely sure. Like when it comes to the issues that are going on, I don't know if this was programmed into me, but when it comes to the whole map agenda, or the whole issue with trafficking, my approach, my life mission, um, would be to find a way to um, change the world in the sense of preventing this type of abuse from happening, and then people who have been abused, that they have the resources that they need to be able to heal and to grow. So my movement would be, in regards to this whole agenda that's going on with the MAP agenda, is not a license to go out there and do what you want to whomever, but kids who are now adult children who have a lot of unresolved childhood trauma, instead of going out and acting on their impulses and continuing that generational sin, that there would be um, new structures or new systems put into place to prevent that cycle of abuse, um, from continuing. And
see, again, I hear you trying to push it through a sieve of your own heavy duty Christian indoctrination. You are a victim of child abuse, child neglect. There's no sin there. Okay. This is trying to make you feel responsible for having been a victim. There is abuse by an earlier generation. That doesn't carry, you're not guilty of the fact that you were tortured as a child, abused or neglected as a child, which is what you keep implying by saying generational sin. I understand these are little dog whistles and keywords you learn in Christian programming, but they don't really apply to reality any more than any other cult would apply. What they are is you're looking at a whole generation, possibly, or at least a lot of members of it, who have been subject to this kind of abuse. And legitimate question: how do you help them, and
Yeah,
how do you stop the cycle?
there's the normalization of it because a lot of uh, these families that participate in it, um, it's satanic. I mean, it's Luciferianism. The cult of Baal.
Well,
Um,
if it is satanic and Luciferian, why does it happen so very much in the most fundamentalist of Christian churches? Why is it we find it so much in the
it's
Catholic Church and all these evangelical
it's bled
churches?
into, it's bled into the culture. It's kind of like, if you've got COVID and you sneeze and then you're around somebody else picks it up. So it's permeated what these elite satanic families have done, and the influence that they have in politics and in the social media. It has infected all of society to a degree.
But let's back up and look at the details. Your mother puts the cigarette lighter in the cigarette lighter socket of a car, like old cars used to have. I remember it, turns around and sticks it in your leg, and she smells
Yeah.
burning flesh. She's not being remote controlled at that moment by these other forces. There's no little devil on her shoulder telling her to do it. This is a personal aberration, which is being exacerbated by somebody not ready to be a parent, not willing to be a parent, not understanding how to be supportive of a child. There's a whole gap in socialization and education
Not
that's happening here.
not to defend her because there's no defense of what she did, but I know that when she did that, she was an adult, but she was not, um, developmentally speaking, she was not her mental age. She had a lot of behavioral issues, psychological issues, and then her own childhood abuse and a lot of anger issues. And I mean, I think I saw her last year, but she's going to be 52 this year, and she's got the mentality of an 8-year-old child. So biologically speaking, physically speaking, she's a 52-year-old woman, but her brain is so damaged.
Well,
There's the
over the years, who's to know how much alcohol, how much STDs may have rotted her brain? I mean, a lot of these things do affect you. If you have syphilis, for example, it deteriorates the brain. If she was promiscuous for a long period of time, there are a lot of things which could have caused that. But I guess what I'm bringing contest to is the whole idea that sin is at work here. This is a superstition that there's something of sin, or it's disobedience of some sort of, like not keeping the Sabbath. See, that's a sin. Not going along with Judaism, that's a sin. Not going along with Islam, that's a sin. And according to either religion, you could literally kill somebody of the other religion for not being part of yours. That too is a sin. So this is a goofy, anti-human sort of idea of
well, yeah,
of just
and
one person trying to control another person through dogma and indoctrination, like the indoctrination you received.
yeah, there is certainly indoctrination, but there's also a lot of fear because I mean, you had what was it, Jim Jones, you had certain
Yeah.
cults. There are religious systems that absolutely indoctrinate their followers, and there's secret oaths that they
Well,
take.
how about this? The reason they work is because all of these Abrahamic faiths teach blind obedience. They call it faith. Don't question the leadership. Don't question the doctrine. I'll tell you what to believe. I'll tell you what it means. If you don't go along with it, you're a heretic. You're an
And
apostate.
they do in some of these clubs, in some of these groups. It's a lot like a gang that if you try to leave, I was told that if I were to leave, that I would be toast in 6 months. In other words, if I were to leave, I would be dead.
Sounds like divine love to me, right?
Well, I was thinking of the movie I first mentioned in our first interview, of Eyes Wide Shut. It
Yeah.
was filmed at a Rothschild mansion, and they were having it was all sorts of Freemasonic symbology,
Hmm.
Freemasonry, but they were having these ritualistic sex orgies in their Masonic temples. And I remember in the movie, uh, Tom Cruise, I don't know what his actual character's name was said that if you say a single word, of course, the Masons have a Masonic death oath that if you reveal what goes on, at this place, that the penalty is death, and people do take that seriously.
Well, I
Uh,
guess, I guess you have to back up a level and say, what drives people to feel so disoriented, so lacking in belonging, so alienated that they want to join up to a totalitarian mindset, whether it's the Catholic Church or the Mormon Church or the Church of Scientology or Shia Islam or Sunni Islam or any crazy take over the world cult, because these are all take over the world cults. They all have a
mhm.
stated goal of go thee unto all the world. And you're going to tell everybody else, you're going to tell people 10,000 miles away, get rid of your own culture, get rid of your own traditions, get rid of your own people. We'll tell you how to live. We'll set our churches up here. Our missionaries will tell you what to think. We'll dictate what your culture should be. I would call that imperialism and colonialism, and that's what they're all based upon.
Well,
That's not divine order.
yeah, and I think of all of religion as the boxes of the television sets in the first Matrix movie where Neo, I don't know if are you familiar with
I remember Neo and yeah, Lawrence
each
Fishburne and yeah.
each box would be a representation of perhaps a political persuasion, such as communism or socialism or capitalism, the Catholic faith, the Protestant faith, the Mormon faith. That these boxes, these television sets that you've seen in the first Matrix, that each
But you
religion
see,
is like that.
I'm kind of old-fashioned. When I think of a religion, I think of it as a practice of personal purification, personal elevation, gaining insight, seeing deeply into the nature of things, leaving everybody else the hell alone, not trying to change anybody
Hmm.
else's opinion, but simply guiding yourself along a better path and trying to lead a better life, not trying to take over some other society around the world or gain somebody else's resources. Yet that's what inevitably
Well,
religion ends up doing.
you mentioned that I had a friend that told me that 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 their faith would eventually take over the world. And there's some people that have that mindset that the world would be better if their religion ran everything, or we lived in a theocracy. And it's unfortunately that type of thinking. Every group has that we have the complete and total truth, and a lot of blood has been spilt in the
Well,
name of.
not every group has that. The original pagan faiths of Europe, for example, had ideas such as there are nine worlds, there are many different faiths. These people over here have this god and goddess. They have this faith, we have ours. And there were a lot of reasons for getting into a scrap with another culture, like the greed of a particular prince or king or the lust for somebody else's land. But
Mhm.
religion was normally not the justification for it. Even between the Greeks and Persians, it was pretty much a matter of this empire versus that empire. But religion was not the impetus for these disturbances, for these wars. Listen, we are really up on our time here. We've run over a bit, maybe 70 minutes here. So we
Okay.
probably need to wind this down, Mike. Let's pick up next time we get together. Think
Okay.
about what makes a targeted individual, how they tick, what anybody gets out of creating targeted individuals, how they gather the data, maybe where this is all headed. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos about.
Before we hop off in the next minute or
Yeah.
so, the patents are out there. The proof is in the pudding, and I did correspond with Robert Duncan, and he did talk about people being activated later on for purposes unknown to them, and I think that resides in our subconscious. I don't know how they activate that, um, but
So you think
I
there are a
do.
bunch of Manchurian candidates out there waiting for a phone call and a coded message or something?
Oh, absolutely. I mean
Okay.
there's the recent thing with Donald Trump and then Charlie Kirk. There are people that are sleepers. Uh, I mean, I don't know how all that works with the mind control, but it that kind of programming really
Wait, what,
does.
what does this have to do with Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk? I know they were
No,
friends, but beyond
no,
that.
no, no. The programming that those guys that took those shots were programmed by the deep state to carry out that task of assassination. That those people are they those are two examples of two guys that were programmed through AI to carry out what they did. Now, of course, separating that, I mean, you could say that the technology wasn't there. They could have just done that because they didn't agree with their
Well, through
politics.
shots, I mean, what kind of shots would you use to get somebody to go take a sniper rifle and shoot at somebody giving a political speech? I'm just
Uh,
wondering.
that they have I guess that I don't know how the technology works, but I know that there's some of these people hear a set of instructions in their head through the voice of God technology. They have a patent for that. I think
I'm
that
aware of that. They do have a patent for that. Yep.
they were programmed to do it. And they have a way of being able to manipulate our energy field. I don't know how that works. Robert is very good with this stuff. I'm not. I don't have a college degree of any sort, but I know that those two guys were programmed by the deep state. There's people that have an axe to grind, and they really want to break down the culture and destroy, I guess, conservative Christian values. They can corrupt people and demoralize them and
Well,
get them.
conservative, family-oriented, wholesome societies don't depend on Christianity. In fact, some of the most debilitated, promiscuous societies are and were Christian societies, like Italy, for example, or Spain, where homosexuality is rampant, drunkenness, drug use is rampant. Portugal, take your pick. Some of the most conservative societies are not Christian, like Japan. So you see, again, your religious prejudice is overlapping a lot of things and going against realities. Some of the most structured and conservative, family-oriented things are not even Western, much less majority Christian. So rethink what you're saying, man.
I
You're
hear you.
trying to take a Bible and stuff everything through it, and it just won't go.
Hmm.
Societies in the East, you talk about a place where if you left your bundle on, you're getting on a bus or something on the side of the road, in Japan, most likely somebody would pick it up, take it to a nearby police precinct and say, hey, somebody lost this. Can you help them find it? That's what would
Hmm.
happen there. The crime rate is so low. The level of personal responsibility and personal honor is so high. Now, that didn't come from years and years of flogging yourself and guilt training and sin training through all the Christian dogma and uh, the sadomasochistic offering of a god being beaten to death on the cross and all that. It didn't come through all that sick shit. It came through a serious conservative culture, building values and building people. And that's why
Hmm.
when they have a serious earthquake in Japan, which sits on all these fault zones, you can look at the cameras and things are falling off store shelves. Customers are stopping, picking them up and trying to put them back. Here, they would be looting in Christian America. They'd be looting and running out of the store with them. So you tell me how Christianity has improved Christian behavior. I'm waiting. It
No,
hasn't.
well, there's a lot of uh, teachings in a variety of faiths that I don't completely understand or adhere to. That's a whole other rabbit hole. a whole other conversation. I just think run of the mill, treat your neighbor the way that you want to be treated, the golden rule.
Yeah, that actually comes from Theravada Buddhism about 200 years before they invented even the idea of a Christian sect. Very old Eastern thought.
Yeah, I
So
just think of
if you begin with plagiarism, how immoral is that?
well, I think that overall, uh, generally speaking, that um, that I think that most of the religions do teach to love other people and to give back to the community. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, there's certainly things that I don't understand in their teachings. There doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
But
actually, when you look into it, a lot of the Abrahamic faiths teach be kind to your neighbor in the church, in your religious community. You have no such obligation to people who are infidels. That's
Mhm,
that's true for all three of them. A totally
yep,
a totally different standard for those who are not your neighbor. They're not considered your neighbor at that point if they don't follow
mhm,
the same brainwashing. That's what you need to understand. They're not universal love. Far from it.
mhm.
You go conquer those people, take their resources, enslave them, and force your faith on them. That historically is exactly what all three have done. You can find it in the Old Testament. You can find it in the actions of the Russian Empire, which is a Christian empire, stomped out 15 different cultures to hammer it into what is today's modern Russia, destroying the
Yeah,
local cultures and people.
there is organized religion, but whatever God is so far beyond anything that a human being can even begin to conceptualize. But human beings have created religion to give them a sense of purpose. But I think God is so far beyond man-made religion that I think it's really an insult to the Creator. But human beings create metaphors and stories and allegories and Aesop fable.
And
Aesop.
control mechanisms.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. But I certainly have the ability to pull myself out of the matrix boxes and have a more of an aerial view of the overall picture. And yeah, religion is certainly used as a form of mind control to control people's actions. And I certainly believe that there is something that created all of this, but we really don't know much about any of it other than that there is creation all around us. And
Well,
I
to
think,
me, the fact that we're here doesn't mean we were created. The fact that there's a tree out in the yard doesn't mean that there's some sort of laboratory like Santa's little workshop where somebody was working on a tree. It just means
yeah,
there are these great forces. We don't understand them, so we create stories about them where we find an anthropomorphized version of ourselves as a person writ large, as a deity or a force or a greater being, imagining all this and putting it all together because we need an explanation. And we're too arrogant. We're not humble enough to admit that we don't really know. I'll start with we don't really
I
know.
yeah, I'm there with the whole idea um that death exists is so anti-nature and anti-reality to me because when a sperm fertilizes an egg, they're two separate there's an egg and then there's a sperm. They come together. It's death is simply a reconfiguration of biochemical matter. Death does not exist. Yes, the physical body becomes obsolete, inanimate, and gone. But what makes us us is I think of it as like a Russian roulette doll of sorts. That I don't believe in the idea that death exists. And I think that religion, like that area, I don't agree with. Well, if you follow this set of beliefs, then and you accept Christ as your Lord and Savior, you will conquer death. Well, death doesn't exist. It's a construct that we have created, and yeah, our physical body expires, but what makes us us is still here. I think it expands. And so to me, again, death does not really exist. It's a construct created by human beings.
Well, maybe next time we can get back into more about how being a target individual happens, what your experience with it has been, and above
And
all,
I'll get into the whole reason why, again, I can brush up more on the White House peace visual. And when I had gone up there and the programming, I, they do it in a way that I don't know how to explain.
well, that's worth saying. Just what you've experienced is what you know, and maybe somebody will write into the show. Maybe somebody will let us know what is behind it if they know
But
more than we do.
I was there at the White House late
Yeah.
at night, and there was a couple of things that were done there, um, programming. So I will sit and I will think about it, and I'd like to get more into the reasons why um, I was being, targeted, and there's just some things that I really don't know if I'd want to go along with. The programming for this country is programming a culture of death and the destruction of the nuclear family and familial bonds. And I don't want any part of any agenda that has to do with destroying childhood innocence or the destruction of the nuclear family, because there really is an agenda to destroy this country and to destroy the family. And family is the
Well,
most important.
I'll go along with you there on all of that, Mike. Thank you for getting with us today. This has been our broadcast with Mike Reynolds from Shamanic Voices. We appreciate you joining us. Our broadcasts are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and several other platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you want to get a written version of this and some very interesting articles, we have a blog available on TeutonicHealing.com, just like it sounds. The word Teutonic, the word healing, nothing in between them.com. And you can get to this broadcast also from the parent website, TeutonicHealing.com. Well, thank you, folks, for listening in, and go with the gods. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Shamanic Voices. Please like and subscribe so that you won't miss our coming episode, where we always try to have engaging and interesting topics and or guests. Thank you, and go with the gods.